The woman stumbled into Wickenburg, Arizona territory, on a blistering afternoon in July 1877. Her dress torn at the hem and dust, caked so thick on her boots that the original leather was barely visible beneath the grime. Eleanor Jane had been walking for 3 days straight, surviving on creek water and the last of her jerky. After the stagecoach, she'd been traveling on broken axle 40 miles back, and the driver decided passengers could either wait indefinitely for help or make their own way. Most had chosen to stay. Eleanor had chosen to walk. She'd learned long ago that waiting for rescue usually meant waiting forever. The town materialized like a mirage at first, shimmering in the heat waves that rose from the desert floor. When she finally reached the first building, a mercantile with a faded sign, her knees nearly buckled with relief. She steadied herself against the wooden post outside, breathing hard, trying to collect herself before anyone noticed her disheveled state. Too late. "Madam, you all right?" The voice came from across the dusty street, deep and concerned. Eleanor looked up to see a man striding toward her, tall and lean in worn denim and a sweat-stained hat pushed back on his head. Even through her exhaustion, she noticed he moved with an easy confidence, the kind that came from knowing exactly who you were and where you belonged. His face was tanned and weathered, with lines around his eyes that suggested he smiled often, though his expression now was one of genuine worry. "I'm fine," she managed, though her voice came out as a rasp. "Just need some water." He was beside her in 3 long strides, his hand gentle but firm on her elbow as her legs finally gave way. "Easy now. When's the last time you ate something?" "Yesterday morning," she admitted, hating how weak she sounded. "Maybe the morning before. I've lost track." Without another word, he scooped her up as if she weighed nothing at all. Eleanor wanted to protest, to insist she could walk, but the truth was she couldn't. So she let herself lean against his solid chest, just for a moment, just until her strength returned. "Name's Yates Parker," he said as he carried her down the street. "I've got a ranch about 2 miles outside town. Going to take you there, get some food in you, and let you rest. No arguments." "Eleanor Jane," she whispered back, "and I don't take charity." "Didn't offer any," Yates replied, and she could hear the hint of amusement in his voice. "But we can discuss terms after you've had water and food." "Deal," she nodded against his shoulder, too tired to fight anymore. The ride to his ranch passed in a blur. She was vaguely aware of him setting her on a horse, mounting behind her, his arms solid around her waist as they rode. The sun beat down mercilessly, but his presence somehow made it bearable. She drifted in and out of consciousness, jerking awake each time her head lolled too far forward. "Almost there," he murmured near her ear. "Stay with me, Eleanor." The way he said her name, soft and reassuring, made something in her chest tighten. She couldn't remember the last time anyone had spoken to her with such genuine kindness. His ranch house came into view, a sturdy adobe structure with a wide porch and corrals spread out behind it. It wasn't fancy, but it looked solid and well-maintained. The kind of place built to last, to weather storms and scorching summers, and everything else the Arizona territory could throw at it. Yates helped her down from the horse, supporting most of her weight as he guided her inside. The interior was surprisingly cool, the thick adobe walls keeping out the worst of the heat. He settled her into a chair at a simple wooden table and immediately set about fetching water. "Drink slow," he instructed, handing her a cup. "I know you want to gulp it down, but it'll make you sick." Eleanor followed his advice, taking small sips even though every fiber of her being wanted to drain the cup in one go. The water was cool and sweet, the best thing she'd ever tasted. While she drank, Yates moved around the kitchen with practiced efficiency, slicing bread and cheese, pulling out cold beef from what must have been an icebox. "You live here alone?" she asked, her voice already sounding stronger. "Just me and my ranch hands. Got 3 good men who work the cattle. They bunk in the house out back." He set the plate in front of her. "Eat slow, same as the water." "You're very bossy," Eleanor observed, but she was already reaching for the bread. "You're very stubborn," he countered, pulling out a chair and sitting across from her. "Walking 40 miles across the desert instead of waiting for help. That's either brave or foolish, and I haven't decided which yet." "Both, probably," she admitted between bites. The food tasted like heaven, and she had to force herself not to shove it all in her mouth at once. "The stagecoach driver said it could be a week before another coach came through. I didn't have a week." "Why the rush to get to Wickenburg?" Eleanor hesitated, then decided honesty was probably the best approach. "I was hoping to find work. I heard there were opportunities in the territory for people willing to work hard." "What kind of work?" "Any kind," she said simply. "I can cook, clean, so keep books if needed. I helped run a boarding house in Kansas City for 5 years. I know how to manage a household, deal with suppliers, handle difficult people. I'm not afraid of hard work." Yates studied her for a long moment, his gray eyes thoughtful. "What brings you all the way from Kansas City to Arizona Territory? That's a long journey for a woman alone." The food turned to dust in her mouth. She swallowed hard, meeting his gaze directly. "My husband died 6 months ago. Fever took him in 3 days. The boarding house belonged to his family, and they made it clear I wasn't welcome to stay. I had a little money saved, enough for a stagecoach ticket west and not much else. I figured the territory was a place where the past didn't matter as much as what you could do." Something flickered in Yates's expression, sympathy mixed with understanding. "I'm sorry for your loss." "Don't be," Eleanor said quietly. "It wasn't a love match. My father arranged it when I was 17. My husband was a decent enough man, but we were strangers who happened to share a house." She paused, surprised at her own honesty. There was something about Yates that made her want to tell the truth. "I know that probably sounds terrible." "It sounds honest." Yates leaned back in his chair. "You said you don't take charity, so here's a proposition. This place could use a woman's touch. I'm a decent enough cook when it comes to beans and beef, but that's about the extent of my skills. The house needs a proper cleaning, my clothes need mending, and I can't remember the last time anyone organized anything around here beyond the cattle and horses. You need work and shelter. I need help. Room and board plus $30 a month. You'd have your own room, door with a lock if it makes you feel safer. The work might be hard, but I promise you'll be treated with respect." Eleanor's heart hammered in her chest. It was more than she'd hoped for, exactly what she'd been praying to find. But years of learning to be cautious made her hesitate. "And what would your ranch hands think of that arrangement?" "I don't much care what they think, but for what it's worth, they're good men. I wouldn't keep them on otherwise, and if any of them gives you trouble, they'll answer to me." The quiet steel in his voice made it clear that answering to him would not be pleasant. "When would I start?" "After you've rested. Take tomorrow to recover from your journey, and we'll figure out the details after that. I'll show you to your room." He led her down a short hallway to a small bedroom. It was simple but clean, with a real bed covered in quilts, a dresser, and a window that looked out toward the mountains in the distance. After weeks of uncertainty and discomfort, it looked like paradise. "There's a wash basin there, and I'll bring you some clean water. Privy's out back. If you need anything, just holler." Yates paused in the doorway. "And Eleanor, welcome to the Parker Ranch." She wanted to say something meaningful, something that expressed the gratitude swelling in her chest, but all that came out was, "Thank you." His smile transformed his face, softening the hard edges and making him look younger. "Get some rest. We'll talk more tomorrow." Eleanor barely managed to wash her face and hands before collapsing onto the bed. She was asleep before the sun finished setting, her last conscious thought that maybe, just maybe, her luck was finally changing. She woke to the sound of roosters crowing and sunlight streaming through the window. For a moment, she couldn't remember where she was, and panic seized her chest. Then it all came flooding back. The walk through the desert, Yates Parker carrying her through town, the offer of work and shelter. Eleanor sat up slowly, taking stock of her body. She was sore in places she'd forgotten could hurt, and her feet were blistered and raw. But she was alive, safe and employed. That was more than she'd had a right to hope for just yesterday. Someone had left a pitcher of fresh water and a clean towel outside her door. She washed as best she could, wishing desperately for a proper bath, and then examined her dress. It was the only one she had that wasn't packed in her trunk, which she'd left with the stagecoach and would hopefully arrive eventually. The hem was torn, the fabric stained with dust and sweat, but it would have to do. When she emerged from her room, she followed the smell of coffee to the kitchen. Yates was at the stove frying eggs while 3 men sat at the table nursing tin cups. "Morning," Yates said cheerfully. "Hope we didn't wake you. Eleanor, meet the crew. That's Marcus, Tommy, and John." The 3 men stood politely, removing their hats. Marcus was older, probably in his 50s, with graying hair and kind eyes. Tommy looked barely 20, gangly and sunburned. John was somewhere in between, stocky and quiet. "Madam," they chorused. "Nice to meet you all," Eleanor said, suddenly self-conscious about her appearance. "Sit down, have some breakfast," Yates instructed, already dishing up eggs and bacon. "Men, Miss Eleanor is going to be helping out around the house. She's to be treated with respect at all times, understood?" "Yes, boss," they said in unison. Breakfast was a lively affair, with the ranch hands talking about the day's work, cattle that needed moving to different grazing land, fences that needed mending. Eleanor mostly listened, getting a sense of how the ranch operated. It was clear that Yates ran a tight ship but treated his men fairly. They respected him, but there was also an easy camaraderie that spoke of genuine friendship. After the men headed out to start their work, Yates poured Eleanor another cup of coffee and sat across from her. "So, let's talk specifics," he said. "I meant what I said yesterday. I need someone to help manage the household. Cook meals, keep the place clean, mend clothes, that sort of thing. During busy seasons like Roundup or branding, we might have extra men around, which means more cooking and cleaning. But most of the time, it'll be just the 4 of us." "That sounds manageable," Eleanor said. "What about supplies? Do you have an account in town, or do I need to manage a household budget?" "There's an account at the Mercantile. Just tell them what you need and have them put it on my tab. But I'd appreciate it if you kept track of spending. Previous housekeeper we had, she'd just buy whatever without thinking about cost. Nearly bankrupted me before I realized what was happening." "You had a housekeeper before, Mrs. Chen?" "Yeah. She was with me for about 3 years, but her daughter in California had a baby and needed help. She left about 6 months ago, and we've been making do since then." He grimaced. "Badly, as you can probably tell. The place is falling apart." Eleanor looked around the kitchen. Now that she was paying attention, she could see the layers of dust, the dishes stacked haphazardly, the general air of neglect. "It's not that bad, I've seen worse." "You're being kind." Yates finished his coffee. "I need to ride out with the men today, but I should be back by evening." "Will you be all right here on your own?" "I'll be fine. I thought I'd start by taking stock of what you have, making a list of what's needed. Maybe do some basic cleaning if I'm feeling up to it. Don't push yourself too hard. You're still recovering." "I'm tougher than I look," Eleanor assured him. His expression softened. "I'm beginning to see that." After he left, Eleanor spent the morning exploring the house. It was larger than it had seemed at first, with 4 bedrooms, a parlor, the kitchen, and even a small room that looked like it had once been used as an office. Everywhere she looked, she saw evidence of neglect. Dust, cobwebs, clothes that needed mending, papers scattered across the desk. But she also saw potential. The furniture was solid and well made. The house itself was well built with good bones. It just needed someone to care for it, to turn it from a place where men slept and ate into an actual home. She started with the kitchen, figuring that was the most important room in any house. She scrubbed the stove until it gleamed, organized the pantry, washed every dish and pot she could find. By the time she was done, her back ached and her hands were red and raw, but the kitchen looked 100 times better. That evening, when Yates and the men returned, they stopped dead in the doorway, staring. "I'll be damned," Marcus breathed. "I forgot the stove was black under all that grease." "You were supposed to be resting," Yates said, but he was smiling. "I rested all yesterday," Eleanor replied. "Besides, I couldn't stand looking at the mess anymore. Fair warning, though, tomorrow I'm starting on the rest of the house." Dinner that night was the same simple fare as breakfast, but Eleanor served it on clean plates and the men ate at a table that wasn't covered in crumbs and spills. It was a small thing, but the atmosphere felt different, more civilized. Over the next week, Eleanor threw herself into transforming the house. She washed curtains, beat rugs, scrubbed floors, and organized every room until it gleamed. She took inventory of the clothes that needed mending and set up a sewing station in the parlor. She went through the office and organized the scattered papers into neat stacks, ready for Yates to go through. The work was exhausting but satisfying. Each day, she could see tangible progress, the house slowly coming back to life under her care. And each evening, when Yates came in from the range, she saw his appreciation in his eyes, even when he didn't say anything. They fell into an easy routine. Eleanor would wake early, make breakfast for the men, then spend the day on household tasks. She'd prepare a hearty lunch and an even heartier dinner, learning their preferences, figuring out what they liked and didn't like. In the evenings, after the ranch hands retired to their bunkhouse, she and Yates would often sit on the porch, watching the sun set over the mountains, talking about nothing and everything. It was during one of these evening conversations, about 2 weeks after her arrival, that Eleanor began to realize something was changing between them. The way Yates looked at her had shifted, his gray eyes lingering a moment longer than necessary. The way he found excuses to be near her, helping carry water or reaching for dishes on high shelves she could have managed herself. The way her heart skipped when she heard his footsteps, the way she found herself watching for his return each evening. She was developing feelings for her employer, and that was dangerous territory. Eleanor had promised herself after her husband's death that she would never again let herself be dependent on a man. This job was supposed to be a stepping stone, a way to save money and eventually start something of her own. Developing romantic feelings for Yates wasn't part of the plan, but the heart, she was discovering, didn't much care about plans. One afternoon, while Eleanor was in town buying supplies, she ran into a woman outside the mercantile. She was elegantly dressed, with perfectly coiffed blonde hair and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "You must be Miss Jane," the woman said, looking Eleanor up and down. "I've heard Yates hired a new housekeeper." "Yes, I'm Eleanor Jane, and you are Constance Miller. My father owns the bank in town." She paused. "Yates and I have an understanding, have for years. I'm sure he mentioned me." He hadn't, but Eleanor wasn't about to admit that. I'm just the housekeeper, Miss Miller. Mr. Parker's personal life is none of my concern. Good. I'd hate for there to be any confusion about the situation. Constance's smile was razor sharp. Yates is a confirmed bachelor, you see. He likes his freedom. But everyone knows he'll settle down eventually, and when he does, it'll be with someone suitable. Someone with connections, proper breeding. Not some dusty refugee from Kansas City who showed up half dead and desperate. The words hit like physical blows, all the more painful because there was truth in them. Eleanor was a widow with nothing to her name, dependent on Yates's charity no matter what they called it. She had no right to the feelings growing in her heart. "Excuse me," Eleanor said quietly, pushing past Constance with her packages. The ride back to the ranch was miserable. Eleanor kept replaying the conversation in her head, each word cutting deeper than the last. By the time she arrived, she'd built a wall around her heart, determined to keep things strictly professional between her and Yates. If he noticed her sudden coolness that evening, he didn't mention it. But she saw the confusion in his eyes when she excused herself early, claiming fatigue. She saw the hurt when she avoided his attempts at conversation over the next few days. A week after the encounter with Constance, Yates finally cornered her in the kitchen after the other men had left. "All right, what's going on?" he demanded. "Did I do something to offend you?" "No, of course not." "Then why are you avoiding me? We were becoming friends, Eleanor, and now you barely look at me." "I'm just the housekeeper, Mr. Parker. I shouldn't have been so familiar before. It was inappropriate." "Mr. Parker," he looked stunned. "You've been calling me Yates for weeks. What changed?" Eleanor busied herself with the dishes, keeping her back to him. "Nothing changed. I just remembered my place, that's all." "Your place?" His voice rose. "What the hell does that mean?" "It means I work for you. That's all this is, an employer-employee relationship." "I shouldn't have forgotten that." She heard him move closer, felt him standing just behind her. "Eleanor, look at me, please." She couldn't. If she looked at him, she'd crumble, and she couldn't afford to crumble. "I have work to do, forget the work." His hand touched her shoulder, gentle but insistent, turning her around. "Talk to me. What happened?" The kindness in his eyes was her undoing. "I met Constance Miller in town," she admitted. "She told me about your understanding." Yates's face went blank with shock. "My what?" "She said you have an understanding, that everyone knows you'll eventually marry someone suitable, someone with proper breeding and connections." Eleanor couldn't keep the bitterness from her voice. "She wanted to make sure I knew my place." "That's complete nonsense," Yates said firmly. "There is no understanding between me and Constance Miller. Her father would like there to be, and Constance herself has made her interest clear, but I've never encouraged her, not once. She seemed very certain. I don't care how certain she seemed. She's lying or delusional or both." He stepped closer, his hands moving to frame her face. "Eleanor, look at me. Really look at me." She met his eyes, seeing intensity there that made her breath catch. "The only woman I have any interest in," he said slowly, clearly, "is standing right in front of me. The woman who walked through the desert rather than wait for help. The woman who turned my bachelor chaos into a home. The woman who sits with me on the porch and listens to my stories and makes me laugh and makes me think about the future in a way I never have before." "Yates," she whispered, his name a prayer and a plea. "I'm saying this all wrong," he muttered. "I should have courted you properly, brought you flowers, taken you on buggy rides. But Eleanor, I'm falling in love with you. Have been since the moment I saw you stumbling into town, too proud to admit you needed help." "You can't," she said, even as hope bloomed in her chest. "Constance was right about one thing. I'm nobody with nothing. I showed up desperate and half dead. You deserve someone better." "You're wrong about that. You're not nobody. You're brave and strong and capable. You took a chance on a new life when most people would have given up, and as for deserving better, he shook his head. Eleanor, you're the best thing that's ever happened to me. I'm scared, she admitted. My marriage was cold and lonely. I don't know if I know how to be loved or how to love back properly. Then we'll figure it out together, Yates said. No promises, no pressure. Just let me court you properly. Let me prove that what I feel is real. Eleanor felt tears sliding down her cheeks, but for once they were happy tears. Okay, she whispered. Okay, yes. He pulled her into his arms, holding her close, and Eleanor felt something inside her finally relax, finally believe that maybe she deserved this happiness after all. The next few months were the happiest of Eleanor's life. Yates courted her with a determination that was both endearing and overwhelming. He brought her wildflowers from the range, their stems tied with pieces of leather cord. He took her on buggy rides through the desert at sunset, showing her the land he loved with the passion of someone who truly belonged to this wild place. He taught her to ride properly, laughing when she nearly fell off the first time, but patient and encouraging until she got the hang of it. They talked for hours about everything under the sun. He told her about growing up in Texas, how he'd come to Arizona territory 5 years ago with nothing but a horse and a dream, how he'd built the ranch from the ground up. She told him about her childhood in Kansas City, her father's drinking problem, the desperate relief she'd felt when he'd arranged her marriage because at least it meant she'd be fed regularly. I won't lie and say my first marriage was awful, she said one evening as they sat on the porch. My husband provided for me, gave me a roof over my head, but there was no warmth, no connection. We were strangers sharing space. I don't want that again. You won't have it again, Yates promised. With me, Eleanor, you'll have everything. Warmth, connection, passion, partnership. I want you as my equal, not my subordinate. Partners, she said, trying out the word. It felt right. The ranch hands noticed the change, of course. It was impossible to miss the way Yates looked at Eleanor, the way she blushed when he paid her compliments, the way they gravitated toward each other like magnets. But their reactions were uniformly positive. About time the boss found someone, Marcus said to Eleanor one day while she was hanging laundry. He's been alone too long. A man needs a good woman to come home to. Even Tommy, young and awkward, managed to stammer out his congratulations. You make him happy, madam. We can all see it. The only negative reaction came from town. Constance Miller made her displeasure known through pointed snubs and barely concealed hostility. Other women followed her lead, turning their backs when Eleanor came into the mercantile or whispering behind their hands at church. It stung, but Eleanor found she didn't much care. She had Yates and the respect of the men who worked for him and her own sense of worth. The opinions of small-minded people couldn't touch that. One evening in October, 6 months after Eleanor had stumbled into Wickenburg, Yates asked her to go for a ride with him. They rode out to a spot he'd shown her before, a high point overlooking the ranch and the valley beyond, where you could see for miles in every direction. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and purple that seemed too vivid to be real. Yates dismounted and helped Eleanor down, then led her to a flat rock where they could sit and watch the display. I want to show you something, he said, pulling a small box from his pocket. Eleanor's heart started hammering. She knew what was in that box before he even opened it. This was my mother's ring, Yates said, showing her a simple gold band with a small diamond. It's not fancy, but it's real, and it's the only thing I have of hers. She died when I was 12, and my father gave me this before he passed, said to save it for a woman who'd appreciate its history more than its value. Yates, Eleanor breathed. I know it's only been 6 months, he continued, but I've never been more sure of anything in my life. Eleanor Jane, you walked into my life and changed everything. You took a house and made it a home. You took a lonely man and made him believe in love. I want to spend the rest of my life with you. Will you marry me?" Eleanor looked at the ring, then at Yates's face, seeing the hope and vulnerability there. 6 months ago, she'd been alone and desperate, willing to trade work for basic shelter. Now she had so much more than she'd ever dared to dream. "Yes," she said, laughing and crying at the same time. "Yes, Yates Parker, I'll marry you." He slipped the ring on her finger and it fit perfectly, as if it had been waiting for her all along. Then he kissed her, tender and sweet and full of promise, while the sun finished setting and the stars began to emerge overhead. They were married in November, a simple ceremony at the church in Wickenburg with Marcus, Tommy, and John as witnesses. Eleanor wore a new dress, pale blue with white lace, that Yates had insisted on buying for her. She'd protested the expense, but he'd been adamant. "My bride deserves to feel beautiful on her wedding day," he'd said, and the way he looked at her in that dress made it clear he meant every word. The ceremony was brief, but meaningful. As Eleanor repeated her vows, promising to love and cherish Yates for the rest of her life, she felt the weight of her first marriage finally lift. This was what she'd been waiting for, this partnership, this love. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Yates kissed her with a joy that made several people in the small congregation chuckle. Eleanor didn't care. Let them chuckle. She was married to the man she loved, and nothing could dim her happiness. The wedding breakfast was held at the ranch, with Eleanor having prepared most of the food days in advance. Women from neighboring ranches came, curious about the new bride, and Eleanor found herself cautiously welcomed into their community. She might not have connections or breeding, but she was married to a respected rancher, and that counted for something. Constance Miller did not attend. Their wedding night was everything Eleanor had hoped for, and nothing like her first wedding night. Where her first husband had been perfunctory and cold, Yates was patient and passionate. He took his time, making sure she was comfortable, checking in with her, showing her what real intimacy could be. Afterward, as they lay tangled together in the bed, Yates traced patterns on her bare shoulder. "Happy?" he asked softly. "Happier than I ever thought possible," Eleanor admitted. "Sometimes I think about that day I walked into town, so tired and desperate I could barely stand. If you hadn't been there, if you hadn't offered me work and shelter, where would I be now? Don't think about it. You're here with me, and that's all that matters. You gave me everything," she said. "Not just shelter and work, but a real home, a real life, love. I don't know how to thank you for that. You already have. Every day, Eleanor, every single day." Their first year of marriage was full of adjustments and discoveries. Eleanor learned the rhythms of ranch life, the busy seasons and the quiet ones, when to expect Yates home, and when he might be gone for days at a time moving cattle or mending far fences. She learned to manage not just the household, but also the business side of the ranch, keeping the books and handling correspondence with buyers and suppliers. Yates had been right when he said he wanted a partner. He consulted her on major decisions, valued her input, and trusted her to run things when he couldn't be there. It was a revelation after years of being told her opinions didn't matter. She also discovered that marriage to Yates was full of laughter and warmth. He had a dry sense of humor that caught her off guard, and he loved making her laugh. He sang off-key while doing chores, danced with her in the kitchen when the mood struck, and kissed her goodbye every morning like a man going off to war instead of just out to the pastures. "You're ridiculous," she told him one morning after a particularly dramatic farewell. "You love it," he countered, and he was right. She did. By spring, Eleanor realized she was pregnant. The discovery filled her with a complex mix of emotions. Joy, certainly, and excitement, but also fear. Her own mother had died in childbirth, and Eleanor knew the dangers women faced. When she told Yates, he went pale. "Are you sure?" "Pretty sure. I've missed 2 months, and I've been sick every morning for the past week." He pulled her close, his hand splaying protectively across her still flat stomach. "We'll get you the best care. I'll bring a doctor from Phoenix if I have to. You're going to be fine. Both of you are going to be fine." His certainty helped calm her fears, though they never entirely went away. But as the months passed and her belly grew, excitement overtook the fear. She and Yates spent evenings planning the nursery, arguing good-naturedly over names, imagining what their child would look like. "If he has your stubborn streak, we're in trouble," Yates said one night, his hand resting on her swollen belly. "And if she has your tendency to sing off-key, the whole territory will suffer," Eleanor shot back. Labor came on a sweltering day in September, exactly 1 year after Yates had proposed. Eleanor had been feeling off all morning, uncomfortable and restless. By noon, the contractions started. The midwife who came from town was efficient and experienced, but the labor was long and difficult. Eleanor lost track of time, aware only of pain and Yates's hand gripping hers, his voice in her ear telling her she could do this. She was strong, just a little longer. Finally, after hours that felt like days, a baby's cry filled the room. "It's a boy," the midwife announced, placing the squalling infant on Eleanor's chest. Eleanor looked down at her son, his tiny face red and scrunched up, his fists waving angrily at being pulled from his warm cocoon. Love hit her like a physical force, so intense it stole her breath. "He's perfect," Yates said hoarsely, tears streaming down his face. "Eleanor, you did it. He's perfect." They named him William after Yates's father. William Parker came into the world with strong lungs and an even stronger will, making his displeasure known at any disruption to his routine. But he was healthy and beautiful, with his father's gray eyes, and as it turned out, his mother's stubborn nature. The household adjusted to accommodate its newest member. Marcus carved a cradle, working on it in secret and presenting it with gruff pride. Tommy was terrified of holding the baby, convinced he'd break him, until Eleanor finally thrust William into his arms and he discovered that babies were sturdier than they looked. John, the quietest of the ranch hands, turned out to have a talent for soothing a fussy baby, humming wordless tunes that made William's eyes droop. Yates was a devoted father, taking to the role with the same determination he brought to everything else. He changed diapers without complaint, walked the floor with William during colicky nights, and looked at his son with such pure adoration that it made Eleanor's heart ache. "I never knew," he said one night as he held sleeping William. "I never knew I could love someone this much." "Two someones," he added, looking at Eleanor. "Three someones," she corrected, placing her hand on her stomach. He stared at her. "Are you saying—" "I'm pregnant again. About 2 months, I think." The joy on his face was worth any inconvenience the pregnancy might bring. Their daughter was born the following summer, an easier birth than William's. Yates had worried himself sick throughout the pregnancy, memories of Eleanor's difficult first labor making him overprotective and anxious. But baby Rose slipped into the world with far less fuss than her brother, arriving so quickly the midwife barely had time to prepare. "She's in a hurry," the midwife laughed. "This one's going to keep you on your toes." She was right. Rose Parker was a tornado from the moment she could crawl, getting into everything, fearless and curious. Where William was cautious and thoughtful, Rose was impulsive and adventurous. They balanced each other, and Eleanor and Yates quickly learned that raising children was both harder and more rewarding than they'd imagined. The years flowed by, marked by the changing seasons and the growth of their children. William grew tall and serious, showing an early aptitude for ranching that made Yates beam with pride. Rose was all fire and determination, insisting on learning to ride before her legs were really long enough to reach the stirrups, helping Eleanor in the kitchen and with the household accounts. The ranch prospered under their joint management. Eleanor's careful bookkeeping and Yates's skill with cattle and horses made them a formidable team. They expanded their holdings, bought more land, hired more hands. The house was expanded too, adding more bedrooms and a proper parlor. But through all the changes and growth, the core remained the same. Every evening, no matter how busy the day had been, Yates would find Eleanor and kiss her hello like he'd been gone for weeks instead of hours. They still sat on the porch after the children were asleep, talking about their days, making plans, or simply enjoying each other's company. "You ever think about that day?" Yates asked one evening, years after they'd married. "The day you walked into Wickenburg?" "Sometimes," Eleanor admitted. She was mending one of William's shirts, her hands moving automatically through the familiar motions. "I think about how desperate I was, how lost. I was willing to trade work for shelter, nothing more. I never expected to find love." "I saw you stumble against that post," Yates said, "and something in my chest just squeezed tight. I knew right then that you were important. Didn't know how yet, but I knew." "You gave me everything," Eleanor said softly. "A home, a family, a real life. Sometimes I still can't believe this is real. Believe it." He took the mending from her hands and pulled her close. "You're stuck with me, Eleanor Parker, for better or worse, richer or poorer, until death do us part." "I can live with that," she said, and kissed him. More years passed. William grew into a fine young man, taking on more responsibility at the ranch, showing the same integrity and work ethic as his father. Rose remained a whirlwind, but she also showed a sharp mind for business and a way with horses that impressed even the most hardened cowboys. Eleanor and Yates grew older together, their love deepening with each passing year. They faced challenges, as all couples do: droughts that threatened the cattle, illnesses that scared them, disagreements that sometimes turned into arguments. But they always worked through it. The foundation of respect and love they'd built too strong to be shaken by temporary troubles. They celebrated 20 years of marriage on a cool November evening, surrounded by their children, now grown, and grandchildren they'd been blessed with. William had married a sweet girl from a neighboring ranch and given them 2 grandsons. Rose had married a horse trader from California and produced a granddaughter with her mother's fire and her grandmother's stubbornness. As Eleanor looked around the crowded table at the family she and Yates had built together, she felt a contentment so profound it was almost painful. "What are you thinking?" Yates murmured, noticing her expression. "I'm thinking about that woman who stumbled into town 20 years ago," Eleanor said. "She would never have believed this could be her life, all this love, this family, this happiness." "I would have," Yates said. "I took one look at you and saw my future. Best decision I ever made, offering you work and shelter. You gave me so much more than that. So did you." He raised his glass. "To us, Eleanor, to 20 more years and 20 after that. To us," she echoed, clinking her glass against his. The party continued late into the night, with music and laughter and the kind of joy that only comes from being surrounded by people you love. But eventually, everyone headed home or to bed, and Eleanor and Yates found themselves alone on the porch, their favorite spot, watching the stars. "Do you have any regrets?" Eleanor asked. "Things you wish you'd done differently?" Yates considered the question seriously. "I wish I'd kissed you sooner. I wasted 2 weeks being professional when I could have been courting you," she laughed. "I was terrified of my feelings for you." I thought I was being smart, keeping my distance. We were both fools. Lucky fools, she corrected. We found each other anyway. We did. He pulled her close and she rested her head on his shoulder, feeling the steady beat of his heart. I love you, Eleanor, more every day. I love you too, so much it scares me sometimes. Don't be scared. We have each other. We'll always have each other. They sat in comfortable silence, two people who'd started as strangers and become everything to each other. The woman who'd offered to trade work for shelter, and the cowboy who'd given her both and his heart, building a life together that neither could have imagined that hot July day in 1877. As they grew older still, their love remained constant. Yates's hair turned silver. Eleanor's face gained more lines, but they were beautiful to each other. Every sign of age a testament to the years they'd shared. They passed the ranch to William when Yates's joints got too stiff for long days in the saddle, but they remained involved, offering advice and support. They watched their grandchildren grow, delighted in the arrival of great-grandchildren, and filled their days with the simple pleasures of each other's company. On a warm evening in the spring of 1917, 40 years after Eleanor had stumbled into Wickenburg, she and Yates sat on their porch as they had countless times before. They were older now, moving slower, but their hands were intertwined, and their love was as strong as ever. I had a thought today, Yates said, about something Marcus told me years ago. What's that? He said, a man needs a good woman to come home to. I've been thinking about how true that is. Coming home to you, Eleanor, every day for 40 years has been the greatest privilege of my life. And you've been my home, Eleanor said. Not this house, not this ranch, but you. Wherever you are, that's where I belong. We've had a good life, haven't we? The best life, she confirmed. Better than I ever dreamed possible. They sat in comfortable silence as the sun set, painting the sky in familiar shades of orange and pink. The same view they'd watched thousands of times, but it never got old. Like their love, it was constant and ever-changing, both familiar and new. In the distance, they could hear William calling instructions to the ranch hands, Rose's laughter as she played with her grandchildren. The sounds of the family they'd built, the legacy they'd leave behind. No regrets? Yates asked, echoing the question from years ago. Not a single one, Eleanor said firmly. You gave me everything, Yates. A home, a family, love beyond measure. You saved me that day in Wickenburg. No, he corrected gently. We saved each other. I was just existing before you came along. You made me live. She squeezed his hand, feeling the familiar calluses, the strength that remained despite the years. Partners, she said. Partners, he agreed. Always and forever. As the stars began to emerge one by one, Eleanor reflected on the incredible journey her life had taken. From a desperate widow willing to trade work for basic shelter, to a beloved wife, mother, grandmother, and great-grandmother, from having nothing to having everything that mattered. She'd walked into Wickenburg 40 years ago with nothing but determination and a battered dress. She'd offered to trade work for shelter, expecting nothing more than a roof over her head and food in her belly. Instead, she'd found Yates Parker, a cowboy with a kind heart and steady hands who'd given her not just shelter and work, but a real home, a true partnership, and a love that had sustained them through 4 decades of joy and challenge. What are you thinking about? Yates asked, noticing her smile. I'm thinking about that day, Eleanor said. Walking into town so tired I could barely stand, stumbling against that post outside the mercantile, looking up and seeing you coming toward me. Best day of my life, Yates said simply. Mine too, Eleanor agreed. Even though I didn't know it then. I thought I was just looking for work. I had no idea I was walking toward my future. Fate, Yates said. Has to be. What are the odds that you'd walk into town the exact day I happened to be there? That I'd see you at that exact moment? That everything would work out the way it did? I don't believe in fate, Eleanor said. I believe in choices. You chose to help me, I chose to accept. We chose each other every day since then. You're right, Yates acknowledged, and I'd make the same choice every time. They fell silent again, but it was the comfortable silence of two people who knew each other so well that words weren't always necessary. They'd had 40 years to say everything that needed saying, and yet they still found new things to talk about, new ways to make each other laugh, new depths to their love. I want you to know something, Yates said eventually. If I could go back and change anything, I wouldn't. Not a single moment. Every joy, every challenge, every ordinary day, I'd live it all exactly the same way, as long as it meant ending up here with you. Eleanor felt tears prick her eyes. After 40 years, he could still make her cry with his words. I feel the same way. You made me believe in love, Yates. Real love, not the cold arrangement I'd known before. You showed me what it meant to be valued and cherished. You gave me the courage to be myself. You were always yourself, he said. Strong and brave and determined. I just had the good sense to recognize it. The moon rose, casting silver light across the ranch. In the distance, a coyote howled, and somewhere in the barn a horse whinnied softly. The sounds of the desert night as familiar as breathing. Promise me something, Eleanor said suddenly. Anything. Promise me you'll never regret taking a chance on me, on us. Yates turned to face her, his weathered face serious in the moonlight. Eleanor Parker, I have never regretted you for a single second. You're the best thing that ever happened to me. The absolute best. And I'll go to my grave grateful that you stumbled into Wickenburg that day and that I was there to catch you. She kissed him then, soft and sweet, a kiss that held 40 years of love and devotion. When they pulled apart, both were smiling. We should probably head to bed, Eleanor said. It's getting late. In a minute, Yates said. Let's just sit here a little longer. I like these moments with you. So they sat, hand in hand, as the night deepened around them. The woman who'd offered to trade work for shelter and the cowboy who'd given her both and his heart, still together, still in love, still choosing each other with every breath. Inside the house, their legacy slept. Children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren. Outside, the ranch they'd built together stretched into the darkness, solid and enduring. And on the porch, two people who'd found each other against all odds sat in peaceful contentment, knowing that whatever challenges life had thrown at them, they'd faced them together and won. As Eleanor finally stood, her joints protesting slightly, Yates stood with her. He kept his arm around her waist as they walked slowly inside, still supporting each other as they had from the very beginning. They prepared for bed with the easy coordination of long practice, moving around each other in the familiar dance of an old married couple. When they finally lay down, Yates pulled Eleanor close, her back against his chest, his arm secure around her waist. It was how they'd slept for 40 years, and neither could imagine sleeping any other way. "Good night, my love," Yates murmured against her hair. "Good night," Eleanor whispered back, lacing her fingers through his. As she drifted off to sleep, Eleanor's last conscious thought was one of profound gratitude. She'd come to Arizona territory seeking only survival, willing to trade her labor for basic necessities. Instead, she'd found a love story for the ages, a partnership that had weathered every storm, and a family that would carry their legacy forward long after they were gone. The cowboy had given her shelter and work, yes. But more importantly, he'd given her his heart, and she'd given him hers in return. And that, Eleanor thought as sleep claimed her, had made all the difference. Their story didn't end with grand gestures or dramatic declarations. It ended as it had been lived, quietly, contentedly. Two people who loved each other choosing to face another day together. And when morning came, they would wake in each other's arms as they had for 40 years, ready to write another page in their incredible love story. The woman who'd offered to trade work for shelter had received far more than she'd bargained for. And the cowboy who'd given her both and his heart had received the same in return. They'd built a life together from nothing, created a family, and loved each other through it all. It was a simple story, really. Just two people who'd found each other at exactly the right moment and had the wisdom to hold on tight and never let go. And they lived happily, surrounded by love and family for the rest of their days.